Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation on the CBRS slash OnGo launch. This is happened now, and CBRS and OnGo are commercially available. And as part of the launch activities, there's been a lot of announcements, a lot of activities from everybody in the ecosystem. I'm talking today to Catherine Melquist, and she is the Senior Director of Global Partnerships at NetNumber. And not only that, but she's also the president of the Mobile Satellite Users Associations. Catherine, thanks for being with us today.
Monica, thank you so much for inviting me to join this interview.
That's great. So can you tell us what is that NetNumber is working on these days?
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. So NetNumber is a 20-year-old company that's headquartered outside of Boston in Lowell, Massachusetts. And we have a unique software platform called Titan, and it enables network transformations, dramatically reducing CapEx and OpEx and time to market for network operators. Our mission is to help facilitate the changing future of telco networks by eliminating latency, simplifying the signaling core, and helping clients to take full capability advantage of the cloud native platforms. And our platform is, we call it All G, and that really evidences the fact that we are focused on helping providers transition from 2G all the way through to 5G. And then on top of that, we've repurposed this platform for private LTE and for CBRS and the new OnGo service.
Absolutely. And so for you, this is a new, not just for you, actually for everybody in the industry, the focus on the enterprise, not just as individuals that use cellular services, but as customers that are deploying the technology through private LTE is new, and CBRS is going to be part of it. Can you tell us a little bit about what is it you're doing for private LTE and CBRS specifically?
So at NetNumber, what we're doing with CBRS is, again, we specialize in the core network software, and our path to market is through channel partners. And the feedback we've been getting from partners is that our subscriber management software is carrier grade, but it is not carrier complex, in that it works very well for enterprise deployments with 15K subs or less, both human and devices. So we're very active with proof of concepts and trials right now, both with ecosystem partners and users in the field, making sure that everything aligns in accordance with user requirements. And we are very excited about CBRS because we see it as a real catalyst for stimulating this market. And so we're working very hard to make sure that our capability aligns with this new spectrum.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, the technology that you might use in a private LTE network is not that different, and you need the reliability, you need the right performance, but the complexity you want to avoid if possible. And so it's not just repurposing, or it's not the same solution. There is more work in it, and with CBRS, and both with CBRS and private LTE, we see that there is an expansion in the terms of the players that are involved. What is that you're seeing in terms of the new players for both private LTE and CBRS?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because so our base of core customers are carriers, located tier 1 carriers around the world. And a year ago, They weren't so interested in private networks. In fact, I think some of them saw them as a competing factor against the business that they are in. I just returned, however, from a customer conference in Warsaw. That was just last week, and it's really interesting. I think the tide is changing. With CBRS, CBRS used to be a growth concept for the telecom market, but I think, excuse me, I should say private networks was a growth concept for the telecom market. But with CBRS, it now is becoming far more real. And carriers are now looking at this and thinking, you know, rather than have key enterprise customers move out of their system for private networks, why not expand their capability to include these as well? And if they don't want to do the actual deployments, they can team with system integrators to create solutions. And then what they then can do is get in the business of providing a managed service. So I think there's some emergence in that sector coming into the market. And then, as you mentioned, Monica, when you introduced me, my background is satellite telecommunications. And satellite is interesting because players in that arena do not want to remain niche. They want to be a part of the larger telecom infrastructure. And then with the convergence of IT and telecom, they're looking for new ways to get inserted into this arena. And private networks is very interesting because satellite players, their installed base of customers, land, sea, and air, and enterprise are natural candidates for private networks in many cases. You think about mining operations, energy platforms, and what they can do is not only expand their wireless capabilities, but they also, it's an opportunity to sell satellite backhaul.
Absolutely. And you can argue that, you know, satellite providers, they've been into the private network for a long time because in a lot of very rural areas, that's all there is anyway, right? So in a way, they have more experience.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's exactly right. They've been, you know, a form of private networks, but not LTE. So that's a new capability that they are working to layer into their businesses. And it's interesting because it's a whole different nomenclature, it's new technology. And so the other thing I see happening there is satellite players and carriers are both teaming with system integrators that specialize in specific vertical markets. And then they work on the deployments. And then you know, these other forms of operators, it enables them to move in and take over, provide a new form of managed service.
Absolutely. So this is from the sort of the service provider point of view. What about the ecosystem in terms of the suppliers? How is that changing, or how are you working with them?
Yeah, well, that's interesting too, because, you know, with private networks, really there's no one player that offers every element of the network. It's fairly involved. And so these ecosystem partnerships are emerging. And enterprise makes a lot of sense because in the enterprise space, they want brand names. They want to know that companies are founded and validated and are here to stay. So large ecosystems with key brand names are really important. I think the flip of that goes to, again, a number of these players have grown up in the carrier realm. And again, you get into that issue of carrier complexity. And for private networks, all that needs to be simplified. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense for this form of deployment. So it's really important to get to work with an ecosystem that is strongly attuned to adaptations that they need to make to the solution set that are ideal for enterprise customers.
Yeah, so in order to simplify, to make the whole network deployment affordable from a complexity point of view to the enterprise, what is the role of a cloud-based network management?
Yeah, well, I mean, the wonderful thing about cloud-based network management is it really enables enterprises to centralize things. And the other thing is they can take full advantage of all the innovations that are coming to market, virtualization technology, container-based technology, open source middleware, all those elements that help factor into a solution that is really cutting edge and will, meet the requirements of IoT deployments and the evolving need of our security and the new forms in which data will move around the system as we continue to move towards 5G.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that when you talk about private LTE, you talk to the enterprise, security is obviously always an issue. Not for all enterprises the same importance, but it is important for all of them. And how can you address that issue in private networks?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, the nature of a private network, the whole thrust of it is to offer. It's a form that offers security, a different form of security. At the same time, the threat vectors are increasing, as are the attack surfaces. And so it's important that with any private network that you seek to deploy, security needs to be a critical component to the solution.
So, with CBRS now being finally commercial after many years of development trials and so on and so forth, how do you see CBRS the US market? What impact will it have?
Yeah, well, I see CBRS as being a real catalyst for the private network market, particularly in the US. It's just recognizing that there's a new form of spectrum that's accessible to a wider group of people, is in and of itself is attracting a lot of players to get engaged. And I believe enterprises will see it as a new arena for protecting their data and putting in place the analytics that they need for efficient operations moving forward. I also think it's interesting, again, at NetNumber, our business is global and our customers, and there are a lot of eyes looking at CBRS and how it unfolds in the US. I think there's a lot of interest in having comparable structures made available in other parts of the world.
Absolutely, and yeah, so in the US is the first market to go, and it will drive it, but then it would help, I would imagine, us other countries as well, because it's a good model, even if from a regulatory point of view is going to be different. Now there is the whole ecosystem that we talked about. There are a lot of different players that have to work together, and a goal is to ensure interoperability. How do you see that working?
How is it working? Well, for us, what's really important is quality throughout the entire ecosystem. We don't do end-to-end deployments, but we are heavily involved in testing the component parts with other ecosystem partners that we have. And I think I mentioned we do it in labs and we do it in the field, and we do it in conjunction with customers that are feeding us real time their specifications and their the ways in which they want to deploy these networks, so that we make sure that that's reflected in the architecture that is fully recommended.
Absolutely. So what is specifically that you do within the value chain? What is your focus of work?
Well, so we provide the core network software for private networks. And so one of the things we do there is have a pretty extensive system of subscriber management that works in the cloud or in various forms, actually. And by centralizing the core the subscriber management function, it really gives more power to the enterprise to manage the users that they have on the network. And the other thing that we do with our we have an architecture that is a master edge architecture. So with one master, you can oversee multiple edge networks and make them interoperable. And should there be an outage with backhaul with one of the edges, they'll still be completely self-contained and operable in the field, so that communications won't go down. So that's fundamental to the use cases for private networks, enterprise, and otherwise. They need reliable, secure communications, and that's what we seek to ensure.
How is that different from the type of solutions you have for a public network for carriers? In terms of complexity, functionality, does the enterprise need to really do it on their own? What should an enterprise expect there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the carrier deployments are significantly more sophisticated. However, the enterprise deployments, the capability is flowing through. It does require knowledge on the side of the enterprise to understand how to put in place and manage and operate a network, a private network. However, at NetNumber, we have core to what we do is provide significant systems of support and training to make the capability fully operational for whoever is owning and operating the network.
I see. So is scaling an issue, because you tend to have enterprises, could be anything, a small, you can have a small enterprise or a big multinational corporation. Can your solution work for all of them?
So we have our network, our Titan software does scale up to manage the largest tier 1 carriers of the world, and it does, and we are embedded in in all the key players. For private networks, however, our software stack has been adapted specifically for private network deployments. So it is streamlined to a point that makes sense for that environment. And there are some differences too in the ecosystem components that you would use for a private network. With CBRS, for example, you use a different type of radio that will ensure connectivity with the SAS, which is elemental to how CBRS works. So that is not at all a part of the carrier installation, but adaptations like that are a part of a private network using CBRS spectrum.
Absolutely. So there is a scalability, and then obviously a focus on on the specific of the radio access. Now, in terms of moving forward, there is clearly today CBRS is based on LTE, but 5G is also coming along. How do you see the transition, and how are you managing that number?
Yeah, well, I will say I think one of the most important things about CBRS is that we really need to make it accessible for everybody. And it's the deployment of CBRS that's really important, and creating information so that is simple for users to make use of. I think that's really important to us, and I know it's very important to other players in the field as well. And then with regard to 5G, 5G is all about an increasing pace of innovation, and our focus is to make sure that the core network software is optimized for use with private networks. And that's with, having legacy network elements as well as the new innovations, and fulfilling the use cases and user experience expectations that users of the future will have, and users of private networks are no different from that in the 5G era. So NetNumber will be, it's core to our business. We're very focused on making sure that our software aligns with 5G, and that will be the same for private networks.
Absolutely. And then I guess it's still a question, how fast the transition is going to be, but as long as the enterprise has the tools they need, that they can pace themselves. And I guess different enterprises will have different timelines as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And again, legacy networks are always a part of any enterprise network. And so they have a lot of factors that they're working with for their overall management of their network solution. And private networks, the way in which those roll out will probably be quite individual to each enterprise that moves that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Monica, thank you so much, and I look forward to working and collaborating with you in the future for CBRS.
Absolutely. This is all very exciting. And this conversation with Catherine Melquist at NetNumber is part of a report on CBRS, on the launch of CBRS in the US. And thanks all of you for listening in.